Okay, so we are leaving Mollusk Island and we are going to be back in London with Peter and Wendy. And this will be for the next couple chapters, really until after the climax of the book. So it's a good chunk of time where we will be with them in London until things are resolved, and then we'll return to Mollusk Island. So this chapter 67 is called Very Warm. It took Peter, Wendy, and the others the better part of 2 hours to reach Westminster Abbey. Just as Big Ben tolled 11, they reached the area by the riverbank near the Abbey, which was hidden from them by dense fog that had settled over the river. And as they had agreed, the others stayed there while Peter flew ahead. Launching himself upward into the fog, Peter was keenly aware of the absence of Tinker Bell. Ordinarily, she would be flying just ahead of him, leading the way with her reassuring glow. But now he was forced to find his way, flying tentatively with his hands in front of him, almost feeling his way in the fog. Finally, through the gloom ahead, he saw the Abbey's 2 front towers. He descended carefully, landing on the edge of a steeply sloped roof behind the towers. He listened for a minute, then hearing nothing aside from the traffic on the street in front of the Abbey, he lowered himself to the ground. He looked around for guards and didn't see any. McGill growled something, and Carl lumbered over, rose up on his hind legs, and put his massive forepaws against the door and pushed. The door to the Abbey burst open. "Good boy," said McGill. Patrick went inside and followed by the others, McGill and Carl bringing up the rear. They went into a hallway, and there was echoing in a dimly lit space. Peter gasped at the beauty of the magnificent stone columns in the center, and the towering arches leading up to the majestic windows, and a ceiling that seemed as high as the sky itself. "Someone's coming," hissed Wendy. And in fact, there were 2 someones, a pair of night watchmen, one stocky and the other stockier, both clutching electric torches. Think about what an electric torch might be that you probably have in your house. As they trotted toward the group. "Here now," said the less stocky one, "stop." This command was unnecessary because the group had already stopped. "Here now," said the stockier one, "the Abbey's closed." We regret the intrusion," said Patrick, "but we're here on an important matter that simply can't wait." "The Abbey's closed." "How did you get in?" "Through that door back there," said Patrick. "That door's locked," said the watchman. "I locked it myself." "Yes, you did," said Patrick. "We'll see what the police say." "Well, we'd prefer you didn't do that," said Patrick. "Oh, is that so?" said the watchman, turning. He then emitted a most unwatchman-like yelp, for he had turned directly into the massive, hairy bulk of Carl, who had circled in around the gloom and on padded feet the size of dinner plates, come up silently behind him. The other watchman then turned and emitted a similar sound, and the 2 men stood standing at the bear. "Now then," said Patrick reasonably, "why don't you 2 gentlemen sit on that bench over there? Carl here will keep you company." McGill stepped forward and, taking the watchmen by their arms, led them to an oak bench. "You'll be fine as long as you don't move," said McGill as Carl began snoring loudly. "If you move, you'll wake him up. And believe me, you don't want to wake him up." He walked away, leaving the 2 men frozen. The group spread out and began the daunting task of searching the Abbey's many spaces, large and small, its chapels, its statues, its monuments and memorials, hoping to find some clue, some sign of where the cache might be hidden. But in the end of the hour, they had seen nothing that a million other tourists hadn't seen before them, and a feeling of hopelessness began to settle over them. They had left St. Edmund's Chapel and were trudging into St. Benedict's Chapel when Wendy felt a strange sensation. She stopped. "Wait," she said. "What is it?" said Peter. Wendy withdrew her hand, and in it she held the locket her mother had given her, the one she had torn from her neck so she could pour its star stuff into the fuel tank of Neville's ornithopter. She had stuck it to her pocket, then kept it with her since. "It's warm," she said. "What's warm?" said Patrick. "It's a star stuff locket," said Peter. "I remember your mother wore one like it." "It's the same one. She gave it to me, and something's making it warm." "Well, let's see if you can make it warmer." He walked toward Poet's Corner. "No, colder." How about now?" "Warmer, much." They reached the sanctuary. "It's very warm now." Her eyes fell on the high altar, and she turned toward it. They started walking quickly toward it. She drew close, then she went around and past it. 10 feet behind the altar, she stopped. She was standing next to a large, ornate shrine. She held the locket toward it. It glowed like fire. "It's under here," she said. "I can almost feel the locket pulling my hand downward." "Fascinating," said Patrick. "What is?" said Ted. This is the shrine to Edward the Confessor, containing his remains. Stands to reason it would be located over the Confessor's original tomb. Ted was studying the area. I don't see any evidence that this floor had been tampered with, do you? The others looked and agreed that the area appeared undisturbed. So if the cache is in fact buried beneath this, said Ted, it's obvious that von Schotten hasn't tried to get at it from here. It'd be an awfully messy job, wouldn't it? The others nodded. So if they're not getting it from here, then they must be getting it from underneath. A tunnel, said Neville. Clever. But wouldn't that be a big job to tunnel beneath the Abbey? Indeed it would, said Neville. It would require a great deal of time and manpower. The missing Londoners, exclaimed Ted. Wait, said Neville. What? It's been going on for months, said Ted. People from the underground. Missing, all from the district line. Are you suggesting that von Schotten is using the missing people to dig a tunnel? Oh, I am, said Ted. The Westminster Bridge Station is a stone's throw from here, and it's on the district line. There was a few seconds of silence as everyone stared at the Abbey's stone floor. So, said Patrick, let's have a look around the underground, shall we? That's the end of the chapter. So this is the setup to send the Starcatchers down to the underground, which of course is like a subway. And chapter 68 and 69 are both very, very short. That'll be our last two. The first one's called Tonight. Silent as a shadow, von Schotten glided down the tunnel, followed by the plodding Ravel. Molly, looking gaunt and haggard, watched him through the barred window of her cells. For hours, she and George, they got very good at Morse code, had been tapping messages to each other when they thought it was safe, discussing the unusual level of activity in the tunnel. Some of it was puzzling, especially the men who had passed an hour earlier, unspooling two fat black cables that now snaked along the tunnel floor. And now von Schotten had come. Something was up. As von Schotten reached Molly's cell, he stopped and looked in. Molly stared into his dark lenses, willing herself to not back away. Tonight, Starcatcher, von Schotten groaned. Tonight the struggle finally ends, both here and on your flying friend's precious little island. And when it ends, your pathetic life will no longer be of any use to me. Maybe you will see the skeleton later. He has been asking for you. Molly said nothing, fearing her voice would display the terror she felt. Von Schotten looked at her for a moment. At that instant, Molly thought she heard something, a faint sound like a muffled bell. She thought maybe she heard it before, but she couldn't be sure. Then it was gone. They passed George's cell without a glance. When they had passed by, Molly took a rock from her pocket and began tapping. Tonight, she tapped. A pause, then George tapped, Are you ready? Molly's eyes went to the floor plank. Yes. Are you? Yes. George resumed tapping. Love you always. Molly, her eyes burning, began tapping back. Love. And they end the chapter there. So a couple really key little pieces there. First things first is Molly's burning eyes represent the sadness that she's feeling because her and George don't want to do the plan that they have to do, but they are willing to do it to try to stop von Schotten. So that's a key piece. The other key piece is that they do reference Mollusk Island. So we kind of finally connect that Cheeky O'Neill is somehow indirectly connected to von Schotten in that he's working for Nereza, who was sent there to take care of business. The other interesting piece, and I'm going to read it one more time, is where he says to Molly, perhaps you will see the skeleton later. He has been asking after you. This, to me, is another key piece that makes me wonder, is the skeleton Slank? Because otherwise the skeleton really wouldn't care to see Molly one way or the other than maybe he likes to torture people. But it almost feels like it's going back to when Molly was a young girl smashing those coconuts on Slank's head on the beach on Mollusk Island. So I don't know. Again, we won't get a definitive answer, but it's something for you to think about as far as how you think the skeleton fits in with the rest of the story and his connections with Slank. All right, so our final chapter, chapter 69, is called The Four. The cell door banged open, and James, lying huddled in the dirt floor with the other 10 prisoners, sat up, squinting at the light of the electric torch. I need 4, said a distorted voice. James, realizing that it was the skeleton, turned away to hide his face, but it was too late. That's the one, said the skeleton, pointing his claw of a hand at James. A guard yanked the rough a guard yanked James roughly to his feet. The skeleton selected 3 more men, and the 4 of them were herded out into a tunnel where 6 guards surrounded them. The cell door shut. The skeleton stepped close to the 4 men, his yellow eye peering out from his hood. "I have selected you to perform a task," said the skeleton. "If you do exactly as I say, you will not suffer. Disobey me, or you even hesitate," and he reached his claw out and touched the shoulder of the man next to James. The man screamed and fell to the floor. Without another word, the skeleton turned and started down the hallway. The guards yanked the fallen man to his feet and shoved the 4 prisoners forward. They were shaken, and hunger had weakened their legs, but they did not stumble. They did not dare. And that's the end of the chapter. So we were set up here for what should be kind of an exciting moment. There's big things going on with von Schotten and his plans. We've got Molly and George kind of ready to enact a plan, and we've got Peter and his group on the way down to the subway system known as the Underground. So should be an exciting read aloud next week.